overview of HTML formats. This is the list of our topics for tonight. Overview of HTML formats, overview of HTML customization, and content sensitivity implementation. Lost a slide. Okay, this got a bit out of order. I'm sorry. Okay, the HTML outputs that the DITA OT currently supports are XHTML, HTML help, Eclipse help, and Java help. And they all share many of the same common features, which is helpful that if you want to do for multiple formats, you want it all to be the same, you can output it to be the same. So in HTML, the conversion does one HTML topic per DITA file. That can be changed using the chunk attribute. There's a link here for more information. The HTML files are automatically the same names as your DITA files. You can change that by using the copy to attributes. And the HTML, it does a lot of navigation with links to your parents and to child, and does all of your related links to all the linking between it. Shows it to you so you have easily hop around your topics just as you would expect in a help set. Okay. They also share that the title of the HTML file will be taken from the topic. You can control your navigation using nav title and lock title, so you can decide what your table of contents should be the same as your topics, or you want a slightly different title there. You can decide how, like HTML help and Eclipse help and Java help, when you do a search, you want to change, if you want it to appear as a different title in the search, you can change it with search title. And you can change what other different attributes, talk, if it should be in the table of contents, or if it should even be available for searching. Okay. So the first one we'll discuss tonight is XHTML. The trans type you would say you would want to do to DITA to XHTML. It's just HTML files. There's no any additional interface. You don't need anything else to see it. Okay. And the DITA OT, when it outputs it, it gives you all of your HTML files plus an index. It's something called index.html, which is your table of contents. And you can rename that table of contents if you don't need it to be called index. You need it to be called default. You need it to be called talk. Okay. It only retrieves your table of contents. You don't have a separate index file. Okay. The table of contents that you automatically get is just a hard-coded table of contents. It's indented, but it's not a collapsible table of contents. There's a plugin available from the tool from the Yahoo user group called Talk.js that you can implement it to get a collapsible table of contents. Okay. Sometimes you want to, the default when you publish to XHTML is you have a table of contents, and you click on a link, it opens it into another window. And most people like to have a frame set. So in order to avoid to generate that frame set, we can use this procedure by renaming the table of contents. Instead of being index, it should be TOC. And then there's an index in the resources directory that we can copy over that will include the TOC and then make us a frame set. So we can see that in the next slide. Okay. So this is what the frame set would look like. You would have your table of contents. You have a table of contents here on the left, and when you click on the link, it opens it here on the right side. Our next format for tonight is HTML help, and the basic trans type is HTML help is what comes with the toolkit. There's available for a plugin called HTML help 2 or HTML help plus, which allows for context sensitivity or localized CHM. We'll come back to context sensitivity a little bit later in the session. Okay. HTML help provide the tri-crane interface, so it has a nice, it comes with a table of contents and an index of a search. You already have all of the pieces that you would expect from a table of contents, from a help set. You can do context sensitivity with it. The disadvantages are it's only a Windows platform. If you want to go to a different platform, then you can't. Then if you want to port it to Unix, then it's not available. A CHM is also only available locally on the client. You can't access it on a web server, and you can't access it even on a remote network. It has to be local, on your local machine. It requires IE and an HTML help ActiveX control to both come with Windows. It's easy to give it to a customer. All you have to do is send them the CHM file. In order to compile, though, you need the HTML help workshop from Microsoft. Okay. The nice thing about HTML help is you can customize their interface. So you have an out-of-the-box interface, but you can customize it a little bit. The DITA OT gives you your files that you need. You need the HHC, which is your table of contents. It provides an HHK, and it provides an HHP, which is what is the project file that tells HTML help workshop how to compile all of your files into a CHM. And you can customize this. You can customize the formatting of your HTML help files, of the HTML files themselves. You can customize your HHP project. You can customize your HHC. When you're using HTML help 2, there's a property for both of those. If you set the XSL, you can provide your own XSL to give your customized files. The HHK generally does not have to be customized. It's created by DOS.jar. It's actually quite complicated to try to go and customize it. And you can add context sensitivity. Okay, this is what HTML help looks like. It has our tri-pane on the right. It has a tri-pane on the left, and it views the topics on the right. And you see here it has a links parent topic, your related concepts. You have the links, anybody who would link to the to or from this topic, you'll see who it is. And you have buttons on the top which are customizable in your HHP. The next format that's available is the Eclipse Help format. The trans type is Eclipse Help. Out of the box, the toolkit is an uncompiled help format. You have a folder and you have all of your files in it, set up in a certain manner. You have a plugin.xml which describes all of it, and then your table of contents, your index, your context sensitivity, and all of your HTML files. It can be delivered as uncompiled, or you can jar it up and you can put it into a jar file so that it's easy to port to your server. It has a tri-pane interface with a talk and index of search. It also does bookmarking. You can have context sensitivity. you can have localized and a localized interface, which is very, very nice. You can have multiple languages on the same help. So you can, someone coming in on a German machine can come and see the German version of the help versus HTML help where each language has to be its own CHM file. It's cross-platform. It can be run on a client or a server, so you can include this in an application, or you can put it on a public web server for people to go and view. It's originally designed for the Eclipse platform, but you can have it as a standalone help. Installing it would require Java and part of the Eclipse on the clients. The DITA OT will create a table of contents for you based on your hierarchy of your DITA map, an index.xml, which has all of your index entries in it, pulled from all of your files, and plugin.xml, which provides which explains the structure of your document, of your help. It basically points to your table of contents, your index, and gives it a name. And for the customization that's available to Eclipse Help, you can change the formatting of your individual topics. You can change the branding of the Eclipse, so you don't have to see the Eclipse banner on top. You can have your own banner, so it looks like your help and it matches your products. You can hide the Eclipse documentation so you don't have to see it. And you can have context sensitivity for it. This is what the Eclipse help looks like. This example doesn't have a banner. It was out of the box, but you can have a banner on it also. Are there any questions so far? The next HTML output that it has is called Java help. It also is an uncompiled help format, but it can be compiled into a jar. It has a tri-pane interface, a talk, an index, and a search like the other ones do. It can also have context sensitivity. It's also a cross-platform that it's meant to work on many operating systems. It's only a client-side help, though. It's not on you can't put it on a web server. Generally, it's used for Java programs, but you can use it as a standalone help system. And you need to have Java and the Java viewer in order to go and view it. So you need to have, that's the application that you need to go and view the help for it. Java help, the DITA OT provides not only the HTML file, but also gives you your table of contents and an index, and with and a help set file which defines what the Java help contains of. And you can change the formatting of your HTML files, the branding of how the help set looks, and add context sensitivity to your documents. Okay, so this is a summary of what each of the different formats provide. Okay, I'm not going to go through each step. We can just have an overview of what each type of output gives us. And here is also what a summary of what the formats can give us. Okay. I know for HTML help to customize the interface, you have just the properties that are available in the HHP, what Microsoft allows for you to customize your interface. Eclipse Info Center is an open source technology, and you can go and actually modify the source files, the Java, the JSP, all the source files for it. Okay. So this is where we're at right now. We've finished the first topic, and we're going to go on to overview of HTML customization. Okay. Why would somebody want to customize the toolkit? The toolkit gives us HTML files, has all the information in it, it has all the links in it. It's very, very boring HTML. Most companies want your HTML, you want your helps to look like your company's styles. You want your company to look, you want it to have your banner, you want it to have your styles, your colors, your fonts. Okay. You might have specialized the toolkit. You might have made specializations of the DTDs, and you want it to, you have this task, but now you have something called troubleshooting, and you want it to look slightly different. Maybe you want to add a new output format. I've had customers who asked for Apple help. They wanted to provide help on a Mac, so that's a new output format. You might want to modify the processing. You want it to do something slightly different, the toolkit to do something slightly different than it's currently doing. You might want it to provide more localization. You want to add new languages. You want to add new strings to the toolkit. Okay. And there's several ways available for customizations. We can, depending on what type of customizations we need to make. This question came up. Depending on what type of customization you want to do is going to depend on where you're going to want to how you're going to want to customize it. So you can customize according to each trans type has ANT parameters that will already available to us to go and specify new information to it. So we're going to come to that also. You can provide your own CSS. That the DITA Toolkit comes with a very, very simple CSS, and you want to add more information to it, you can provide your own CSS. You can create plugins to override XSL templates. That's going to be a webinar that's going to be available next week. You can apply DITA specializations, and you can add new languages and new text. That's going to be in another webinar about localizing style sheets. So customization using ANT parameters. So using the toolkit without having to know programming, without having to know XSL, we already have parameters we can pass on to ANT, onto the processing, that the toolkit is already built in, and we hand it to it, and they know what to do with it. Okay. So the first one is customizing a CSS file. So there's several CSS files, several ANT properties, which allows us to specify where the CSS is and how the file should look for it. Okay. So the first one is really args.css. That's the first where we really want to start. Where args.css is the name of the CSS file. It's like yourcompany.css or yourcompanyhelp.css. Args.css path says where the HTML files are going to look for the CSS. What's the relative path from the HTML files to the CSS? Is it going to be in the same directory? Are you going to put your CSS in a subdirectory? Args.copyCSS, should the processing copy your CSS over at runtime? Generally, I would assume that you would want to copy it over, so you make sure to include it in your help. So it would be a bit of a disappointment if you made the CSS reference in your files and then forgot to deliver it. And CSS root is where is the CSS located on your machine. Okay. You can override the XSL file. There's two XSL files, DITA to XHTML for XHTML and Eclipse, and DITA to HTML for Java and HTML help. The difference is that XHTML it has one DTD, is a very strict DTD to make sure that it's would be legal XML after HTML, and HTML is not as strict. Java help and HTML help are using the less strict formats. So we have a parameter called args.xsl available to us, which you can provide a new style sheet. You can have a new style sheet that instead of calling DITA2 XHTML, you can call it DITA2 My Company HTML. And why would you want to completely use a different style sheet versus theirs? So if you have completely different processing, then you might want to do it. If you have two different plugins, I had a customer who had two different formats of HTML. I said before, they had Apple help, but they still had Eclipse help. But they were slightly different. And if I used just the regular plugin mechanism and I plopped my code into the regular HTML XSLs, then both formats would share the exact same code base. And at this point, I didn't want both of them to have the same code base. I actually wanted them to have two different code bases. I needed them to have slightly different. So I had different processing. If you want to avoid having to create a plugin, if you come to the other plugin, you'll see that it's actually not as complicated as people think it is. But once you learn how to do it, it's really quite simple. If you want to provide the ability for people to choose which style sheet they want, so you could do args.xsl. And if you do this and you want to override the style sheets, but you don't want to override everything. You want to override some of it, and you want to use the existing code. Why should you go and rewrite something that's already there? Or maybe they'll change it and you want to keep what's there. So you can link in the existing ones. You can have an import to the existing ones in order to reuse that code. And then you can only override what you need. Are there any questions so far? Any questions? Yes, no? Okay. Okay. Quite often you'll have headers and footers, and in PDF you have a header and footer on every single page. You'll have the chapter name, you'll have sometimes a page of numbers. You'll often have neither of those are really applicable to HTML, but you'll often have your company logo up in the header. And you'll want that sometimes you'll want that in your HTML also. You want the HTML to look like your HTML. You don't want it to be some generic vanilla look and feel. So you can provide an XML file that contain what your headers and footers look like. Okay? So there's three parameters for this. There's args.hdf. So that's going to go in the head of the document. So that would be more for like scripts, to add extra scripts or extra CSS, because args, the CSS that we had just talked about, args.css only allows you to have one CSS to add to a file. If you have multiple CSSs, then that isn't going to help you. You can use args.hdf to include the list of CSS files that you want to include at the top. Or sometimes you have a script. You want to include a script for your HTML files. HDR is to put a running banner at the top of your document. You can have it really can be anything that your company needs. You can have your company logo, a link to your company website. And then args.footer, you often have a footer at the bottom of a document. You'll have a copyright statement or your website name or a phone number to reach your company. step is to use trans-type specific parameters. Those are parameters that the DITA OT out of the box comes with and will use. So this is just a list of some of the main ones that are available, but you can look at the C DITA OT. That's just, I'm reusing C DITA OT just as the root to your DITA directory. Can you hear me now, Brenda? Can you hear me? Okay, just please hold. Okay, okay, everybody can hear me now? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Okay. Does anybody have questions about what we discussed? That was the easy part. Context sensitivity is going to be a little bit more complicated, okay? So please, if you have any questions, please let me know. Next, okay. Context sensitivity. Context sensitivity is nice. From a user experience, you're on a certain screen, and you can press F1, and it brings you up the help exactly where you are, which is really nice. You don't have to go searching for it. From the programmer side, it's a little bit more complicated. How do we connect that topic to a specific page? And how do we do it without hard coding which HTML file we're in? Okay. So HTML help and Eclipse, I want to focus on those two, have different ways have different ways of doing it. Okay, HTML help was made as a successor to WinHelp. I told somebody we were converting WinHelp into customers using WinHelp. They said that was before the dinosaurs. It's so old. So HTML help, it's not being as supported anymore, but it's the successor to WinHelp. So HTML help has, I'm going to go on to the next screen because the next screen has a diagram for it. It's a little bit easier to understand. Okay, let's start here with our application. Start here with our application, and the programmer has assigned a topic ID to a certain screen, number 1, 2, 3, 4. He's gone and the developer has gone and made a map file. It's similar to what he would be using in programming. It defines a constant. It gives a constant to that number. It makes a constant called IDH dialog help with that number. So far we've defined a number, a string with a number. We need to then have a string to define which HTML file is this going to. So we have an alias file that says this string equals this page. So we had to do 2 steps. We had to start off with a number. We had to assign the number to a string, and then that string is, an HTML page is assigned to that string. And that's how context sensitivity works in HTML help. In Eclipse help, it's not as complicated. Okay? Along with your Eclipse help, you have your plugin.xml, which points to a table of contents. It points to an index, and optionally can point to a context file, where you have each ID, each context ID, you give it a description. You can have a short description for it, and it has an href to the table, to where that file is. Okay, and then with the program uses this com.mycompany, my plugin is the plugin ID, is the unique identifier for your plugin. So Eclipse would call this with com.mycompany, my plugin.context ID 1, and it would pull up this information and would be able to have the link to it. So our problem is, how do we, as writers, keep this? How are we going to keep this information between the writers and the programmers? How are we going to store the context string or the topic ID? Where are we going to keep it? We don't want to have to maintain that alias file. You don't want to have to maintain. The programmer is going to maintain the mapping file. That's probably a given. We don't have to maintain the mapping file. You don't have to go. I changed the DITA topic. The file name of the DITA topic changed. Now I have to remember to go back to the alias file and change it there. Nobody wants to have that on their head when they're trying to publish. Okay, so for the toolkit, Deborah Pickett made a plugin to the toolkit called HTML Help 2. It's available on DITA users, and it provides a way for us to store the information in our documents. It also provides she gives a way of storing it in the documents, and also gives a way of taking it out. Okay, it's expecting it to look like this. She's expecting that in the topic we have a prologue, and we have a resource where the app name, it's quite definitive, and it must be spelled exactly like this, Windows Help ID, and the ID is a number. Okay, that number is the number that the programmer was going to call. Right? We go back a step. Let's just go back a step. You go back a step. It's this number, this 1, 2, 3, 4, that the programmer is going to call. Okay? And it maps to our mapping file. It would go pound define. It's going to make it it doesn't know that about IDH help dialog help. It doesn't know about that context string at all. It's going to define it as identity underscore 1234, and then it gives us identity underscore 1234 equals page1.html. It doesn't know about our strings. So this is if you don't mind having you being in control of the numbers, and then providing the programmer with the mapping file, then this works. The advantage of it is very easy to maintain the context information. It's there. You store the information in the topic. It goes along with the topic. You don't have to remember to go and change it someplace. Okay. The disadvantage is that you're storing a number. You're not storing the string, which is often helpful to the writer. You don't really know what the number is. You don't really even care what the number is. You want the string. The people who used to work in WinHelp, you had your context strings at the bottom of and a footnote at the bottom of the topic. You had a context string. You let the programmer deal with the numbering. Okay. And another problem is that a lot of CMSs use the ID attribute to store their internal IDs. So we can set ID to be 1234, and then our CMS has gone and changed it into a GUI ID, and it's no longer useful to us. Okay. So what we've recommended to customers, to a lot of our clients, is to use instead of in metadata, make a data tag where the name is context ID. Some people like topic alias, especially if they're coming from a FrameMaker background. And the content of it is your context string. Okay. So here I have a data tag. The name is context ID, and then I just put my context string in here. Okay. We would have to modify the plugin to go and deal with it. There's the HTML Hub plugin has an XSL to go and extract all the aliases to make the alias file. So we'd have to go and modify it to look for this specific element instead. It's looking very specifically for resource ID app name equals Windows Help ID. We'd have to change it. In this case, we would have to go before compilation, get the mapping file from the programmer. Make sure that we have the most updated mapping file from the programmer. The programmers usually are the ones who are maintaining it, so it's not really a problem. Okay. Okay. Any questions so far on this part of on how this is working? For context sensitivity and Eclipse help, okay, there's IBM is maintaining on SourceForge something called CS Help plugin. Okay, it's a plugin for it's a plugin specifically built for maintaining context sensitivity information. Okay, they didn't seem to want to go and change your topics. They have a special topic type that defines your context sensitivity. It's basically mimicking the structure of that context file. That it's going to go in and have a topic for each ID, has your description, it provides your description, and then has links to each topic that you want to go to, where the actual information is located. Okay, it's going to go to the final location in your Eclipse help. Let me see if I could. Let me just. Okay. Okay. The advantage of it is that it transforms out of the box. That you can, if you can set up your information and store your topic aliases here, then you can have you can add a link and add another to your, you would run, you'd have a target calling Eclipse help, and then you'd have a target calling for the context sensitivity work, and you would get your context sensitivity information. The disadvantages of it is that you have to maintain your context information outside of your help set. But you've had to go and now go and keep that context information in a whole nother topic. You'll have to have a topic that contains all your context IDs with links to where they are in your Eclipse plugin. So you now have to maintain two pieces of information. Okay. Also, the same problem with the CMS. You often will override that ID. So you can have ID my topic alias, and now it became my GUI ID, and it doesn't mean anything to you anymore. Another disadvantage is that if you want to use the same topics for HTML help and Eclipse help, and you even want to use the same topic, the same context ID, you have to store it in two places. So again, we recommend the same thing, that you want to store it in we can store it in the same place. That store in the same place in the context ID, in the document, as we said, for HTML help. Okay. It would require work to do it, though. You'd have to take there's no out of the box programmability for this right now. You could do a combination of things. The map to CSH _alias.xsl shows you how to go and retrieve all of your aliases from each file, versus the CS help runs on each file and makes a context file for each file. You probably want one for your whole map. So CSH _alias goes into each topic and pulls it out, while the DITA to context gives you the structure of how the XML file is going to be. Any questions on this? And everybody understand what I'm trying to say here? Does everybody understand how this is working? I'd like to open up the floor to any comments, any questions anybody has. Was this all? And that's the end of the or if we've come to the end. Please be in touch. Please let us know how we can help you. If you have any questions, please feel free to, if you have any questions about tonight's webinar, please feel free to let me know.